has it not been the best week to be a metalhead? We have had one of the best bands in metal since the last, 15, 20 years. They've been around since 1996, if you weren't aware of that. Gojira played at the opening ceremony of the Olympics in Paris, which is insane. When I heard that they were going to be playing there, I thought, like, this is either going to be fantastic or they've told the band, like, tone it down, okay? This is an international event. Lots of people are going to be watching. Please chill. But they did not, they were apparently not told that because this was quintessential Gojira. Screams, growls, heavy guitars, heavy drums, just all the things that we love about this band. The only thing I guess we can complain about is that it's nearly impossible to find a proper clip of this performance without any commentary, because they quickly get taken down because of copyright and stuff. I mean, it'll get better. It's still like fresh and new, so it'll probably be fine in like give it a month or something, or a couple months, I don't know. But yeah, what an absolutely metal AF performance. Outside of that castle with the Marie Antoinettes, they had an opera singer. They had red smoke coming out of the castle. They had these red ribbons they were shooting out, like it looked like blood. They like really went all out with it. Incredible, amazing, epic, all synonyms for these words in the English language. Another weird thing that happened though was that you see a lot of discourse online about how the Olympic opening ceremony was satanic. It was mostly about the parody satire of the Last Supper, even though it was not that at all. But people got mad. I also feel like a lot of it is just being milked for clicks. But I guess recently metal has really been surging in popularity, so I guess we're also due for Satanic Panic 2 Electric Boogaloo. Another thought I had this past week is like, does this make Gojira a gateway band now? Yeah, and I absolutely don't mean this as a bad thing at all. Gateway bands are important. Gateway bands are what pull people into metal. Back when I was growing up, it was bands like Linkin Park and Korn and Slipknot and System of a Down and those new metal bands from the early 2000s. And nowadays, the kind of gateway bands that people talk about a lot are like Sleep Token, Electric Callboy, Baby Metal, that kind of stuff. Generally speaking, gateway metal bands have huge metal energy for sure, but they also involve like a more poppier sound, so it's a bit more palatable for people who are not used to listening to more extreme genres of metal. Now, as for Gojira, they don't do that at all. They're a death metal band, and so if your first exposure to metal is Gojira, then you might be like, wow, this is a lot to take in. And that's fine. It's not for everybody. I know metalheads who it took them years, over a decade, to get into heavier genres, but it seems that Gojira is a gateway band into more extreme stuff. Like maybe you've been listening to softer genres of metal for a very long time, and then Gojira is then at the gate of like, hey, here's the extreme stuff. And yet they used to be a very technical, proggy death metal band, and they still have their sound. It's a very unique band, I would say, but they've become a lot less technical since, I would say, L'Enfant Sauvage, but especially on their last two albums, Magma and Fortitude. They've sort of simplified their songwriting a bit. I mean, they still go really hard, so I don't see this as a bad thing at all. But their songs have gotten a lot shorter and tighter than they used to be on their first few albums. Now, the thing with gateway bands is that there's gonna be a lot of metalheads that consider them important for the genre because it brings new people in all the time. But also, the implication with the term gateway band is that, oh, you don't stick with this. This is what you start with, but you get over this, right? You get into heavier stuff. You go down the rabbit hole of death metal, black metal, all these extreme genres, and you leave the gateway bands behind. This is certainly something I experienced when I was growing up. When I started to make some friends in the metal scene in my town, they were like, oh, what do you listen to? And I'm like, oh, yeah, stuff like Linkin Park. And they were like, oh, great, but like... And I had this buddy who just straight up introduced me to like all the black metal from the 90s. And I thought, oh, I guess I'm over the gateway bands now because I listen to some seriously extreme stuff now. You sort of do this out of peer pressure, I guess, in some kind of way. But I also always felt like, why do I have to stop listening to bands that I really, really love? And the older I get, the more I really just think this, what a strange attitude to have, that you will tell somebody like, oh, this band you really love, forget about them. Here's more extreme stuff. This is your life now as a metalhead. But I definitely went through that phase of like, I'm a real metalhead now. I listen to the most extreme bands on the planet. And I think it's almost like a rite of passage for any metalhead, especially if you continue being a metalhead into adulthood, that at some point you realize, what a silly idea. I like all of it. I like the extreme stuff, but I'm gonna still listen to Hybrid Theory because it's an absolute banger of an album. And I do feel like most people get over that idea of like, oh, you're only a true metalhead when you listen to the most extreme stuff. You have this gatekeepy attitude with metalheads. Oh, gateway bands, sure, but I'm over it. This stuff is for weaklings. It's not even real metal. New metal is not real metal. Metalcore is not real metal. I mean, I understand that there are different genres under the metal umbrella, that they have their sort of definition, even though when you ask these sort of elitists, so why is it not real metal? They will tell you like, oh yeah, because of this and that, but there are some bands that tiptoe the line, and okay, then the definition is not as clear-cut as you make it out to be. So yeah, gatekeeping elitists in the metal scene, I think like they're always going to be there, but I also think it's just that a phase that most people kind of go through. And then they grow up, and then they grow older, and they realize it's all good, it's all fine, listen to whatever you want. If you want to stick to the softer genres, it's all fine. If you listen to really extreme stuff with 80 monthly listeners on Spotify, it's fine. I don't want to nag about gatekeeping in metal too much. The only thing I will say is that this is not an attitude I generally see at shows and festivals. Everybody just shows up in their gear, in their band shirt, and nobody cares what you're wearing. I mean, you could honestly just go in blue jeans and a polo and nobody's gonna give a fuck what you're wearing. Everybody's just there to have a good time. And the sort of gatekeeping elitism I see is mostly online, on like places like Reddit. I'm trying to quit that stupid website, but I just can't. And I've honestly, since I was a teenager, I have not seen anybody care as much about the strict definition of what metal is and isn't as people online. So I just honestly can't take it too seriously. And that's one of the things I love the most about metal, is that it is so diverse. It's a big umbrella. And I honestly just don't really care that much about what the strictest definition is of metal. If it has that kind of energy, then I'm probably gonna be into it. And this is something I'm gonna repeat a lot when I talk about music and movies here on my silly little channel, that art in its broadest form, whether it's music, movies, paintings, performance art, it's about the kind of energy that you get from it, right? And with metal especially is something with this very specific energy to it. And metal especially has that kind of energy that may not be easy for many people to get into, but outside of your regular radio-friendly pop music, it's probably the biggest music genre in the world because it's so diverse. The diversity is what keeps it interesting. The diversity is what gives rise to your gateway bands, or the concept of gateway bands, where people are drawn into the genre. You know, most people won't start to play music and form a band, but some of them will. And these are like the new bands that we see today that are getting huge, that are getting big followings, that are helping the genre rise in the most popular it's been since I was a teenager in the early 2000s. And I don't see how this is a bad thing. And I don't know how it is for other metalheads. Like, I feel like they tend to stick to a certain sound, a certain genre under the umbrella, but I like pretty much all of it. And for me, it's also gonna kind of depend on what mood I'm in, what kind of vibe I want that day. Again, it's about energy. It's about the kind of energy you get from it. But mostly I'm gonna just throw on my Spotify playlist and it's all over the place. Like, it'll go from worship Satan to the planet is dying to, hey, let's have a party, to existential dread, to give me chocolate. And that's all part of the fun, at least for me, and I'm sure it's gonna be that way for many, many, many other metalheads. And so yeah, don't let anybody tell you that your gateway band is bad because it's not extreme enough. And also, the majority of metalheads that I know don't exclusively listen to metal. I mean, how many metalheads are Swifties? They won't readily admit it, but when you press them a little bit, they will like, oh yeah, it's fun, you know. And I think that's one of the reasons why these metal bands that have a very poppy sound to them grow so popular, is because, well, not only is it fun, there's just not that many metalheads that pin themselves down to just listening to metal. They actually like some country sprinkled in. They actually like some hard style and electronic stuff sprinkled in. They like a little bit of J-pop in there. And it also like gives you that kind of energy. And of course it's not going to work for everybody. I'm a pretty big fan of baby metal and electric callboy, but most of my metalhead friends are like, I don't know, this is not for me. But it's cool, it's fine. I don't hate them for it. They don't hate me for my music taste. You know, nobody's telling me like, what kind of silly things are you listening to? You're not a real metalhead. If you ask me if you listen to metal, even if it's just like Iron Maiden kind of stuff and softer kind of stuff with like no screaming vocals and no sick breakdowns or anything, you're also a metalhead. So yeah, I don't think my opinions are really that out there. They are lukewarm at best. So as somebody that's been into metal for a long time, and maybe if you're a younger person, or maybe you're somebody who's just getting into metal and watching this, just chill. Don't let anybody tell you that what you listen to is bad or not metal enough. Because it's all about energy anyway. If it gives you the kind of energy that you look for, that you want in music, then it's fine. And especially the kind of chronically online elitism is just, it's not that many people. Don't take them too seriously. If there's one thing I've learned from being a metalhead since a teenager, it's that you should not take yourself too seriously. You can take the music seriously. I think the only sort of gatekeeping that I would engage in is that if you're getting into metal for the first time, look up some things about the history of metal, understand what the important bands were from the past, what the important influences were for the biggest subgenres in metal, and just listen to as much of it as you can. And if it takes you a while to get into the harder stuff, that's fine. If you never get into it, that's fine. If there's only like a couple of bands you listen to and most of the other stuff you like listening to is like more pop music or rap and R&B, that's also fine. And one thing I also want to say is that the most extreme genres of metal are probably always gonna just be underground. Like, we've had this big performance by Gojira now, but I doubt very many people will immediately jump on that. I mean, even the more popular so-called gateway bands of today don't really get played much on the radio. They're popular, but they're not like pop music popular. So I feel like metal is always going to be like on the fringes a little bit. The thing with gatekeeping, I think, comes from wanting to keep it at the fringes, because it makes you different from everybody. It makes you different from the normies. And if that's what you want, then metal is a great genre, I guess. I don't think it's ever gonna be on the same level as your regular pop music, mostly because a lot of it is quite extreme, and it's just not for most people. So I don't even know what the elitists and gatekeepers are worried about. And if some songs and some bands get really huge, then that's actually totally awesome, because it brings new people in. Yeah, like I said, it keeps the genre alive. And if you have your huge stadium bands like Metallica, and Rammstein these days is a stadium band. And I know people who like Rammstein but don't like any other metal band, and I don't care. And you know, Gojira playing at the Olympics is probably gonna have a little bit of influence in that sense, that more people are gonna get into metal, and we're gonna get more kids listening and more kids forming bands, and the next big bands of tomorrow are gonna maybe have been influenced by Gojira playing at the Olympics. And I can only be happy about it. So yeah, I think I said the most important things that I wanted to say. This is not a hugely different opinion from what I have seen a lot of people say about the whole thing. If you have anything to add, that's what the comment section is for. Thanks for listening to me rant. Bye.